Hey team, welcome back to the show. Today it is Coach Natalie and I talking about how Natalie grew her lats and quads. So, this is in response to a listener question, which was, do you already have an episode on how you grew your lats? Again, assuming this was aimed towards Natalie, not me. Serious question. I'm not specifically interested in growing my lats, but I'm curious how your training has looked and how long it took to get here. Oh, yes, and the quads. Can't forget those. So, basically just digging into what has changed. How have we gotten such meaty quads and Dorito shaped lats? Before we get into it, any personal updates, anything new to fill us in on, Natalie?
Got more food. Yeah,
And once again,
I know.
it's like Groundhog Day.
Yeah, he just took away. I had like training day nutrition and then rest day nutrition. My rest days were just a little bit lower. And so he was like, "Yeah, we're just like gonna get rid of those. So we'll just like bump it up." And I trained 5 times a week, so it was only two lower days. And honestly, those days were such buzzkills. So really happy that we dispensed with those. And honestly, it's like it was getting bad too. I was like pretty hungry on my rest days. I'm like, why is this happening? Why are we doing this? Anyways, I did not complain to him. I just was reporting the facts and he's like, yeah, okay, we'll just like bring your food up. We also increased cardio. So I was doing 5 times a week for 15 minutes, which is honestly amazing. And so now I'm back at 5 times a week for 25 minutes. So 10-minute bump each day.
Okay. Pretty considerable bump, honestly.
Yeah, we're getting things ready to move, I think. And then a little bit of a deload this week. So I'm still training, but with like my upper body push and pull, we cut volume a little bit. This was a discussion between myself and Dom and Nick, my other coach. And so they agreed. They're like, just on your compound lifts, just like get rid of a set. Um, Isolations are fine except preacher curl, and then reduced load by like 20%. So I'm still training, still going, but a little bit of an upper body deload. Just have some. I've been saying this. I feel like the last couple of weeks, but just like really cranky elbows. Um, and I saw my chiropractor today, and he was like, "What on earth have you been doing to your bicep?" So he just like laid into my biceps, like both of them, and it was like terrifying and miserable. Um, so things are just like generally very angry. And honestly, nothing's wrong. Like, and like movement checks out. Like I'm moving well. It's just like it's overuse. And it'll be fine. So yeah, this
Got
is why
some,
we have things like deloads.
yeah,
And coaches to pull us back.
got some grumpy bows, but it's normal for there to be so few aches and pains. Like when we truly need a deload for a truly just because it's the training fatigue that's driven it. It's pretty normal for it to be like, oh, like this is a little bit more achy. This is a little bit more achy, and those things typically disappear pretty quickly. Your elbows, I know, have stayed beat
I
up
hope
for a
so.
while,
My
but
my left shoulder's back to bothering me. Like, hasn't really been this bad for a while. Um, so that's it's kind of a bummer, but again, I know what it is. Like it's just overuse. So
yeah,
I honestly I trained earlier today and like, again, took my compounds down, took loads down, and like it felt it didn't feel good, but it could have felt a lot worse. So
okay, okay. I feel like those sessions are always honestly deload sessions are always the ones that feel the worst for some reason.
yeah, it was nice. Like I'm pretty busy lately. I've got a lot going on between like work and some other things. So, I choose to kind of look at it like, oh, I got a little bit of time back.
Yeah.
So that is nice. It was kind of like easy breezy, like in and out.
Okay. Okay. Dope. On my end, not really anything new yet. I check in today, so I imagine I will. Like, the new plan will change quite a bit, but I mean, as of now, just kind of first week out of the diet. Feel pretty good. Definitely have a lot more energy all around throughout my day. I got a few of them. I haven't seen a whole lot though yet. She sent me over a couple of peeks. Um, but I haven't really gotten any like that many like physique type shots yet. Got like I sent you guys like the picture of like me walking in Nego.
Oh, great. Yes.
There were like a couple like that, and I
Yeah,
like
she
posted
looked
that like
great.
she did look great. She looked jacked. Just her refusing to go on a walk was so typical.
At least we know she's flexed.
But no, the few I got looked really good. I was really happy with how they turned out from like
Good.
she did a
Yeah.
really good job. But no, I think it'll probably be another week or so before I see the rest of them. But I'm excited for it. It seems like she crushed it.
Cool. Good to hear.
All right, let's talk about how you built your lats and quads. So, first, timeline. How long have you intentionally been trying to grow your lats and quads?
I mean, I would say like forever, but
Since birth, when your parents said
yeah,
you were laterally. Got
that's
it.
all I ever wanted. So generally, I feel like the timeline of my training evolution is like it's just gotten more focused over time.
Mm-hmm.
Because at first it just kind of starts out very much like I just want to get jacked and like I don't, so like my training programs have been very like evenly like volume and body part splits and things like that have just been
Yeah.
very like even. Um, and then when I decided I wanted to like when I officially decided I wanted to compete, and I would say like I sort of I sort of kind of formalized that, I guess, like when I started with Dom, like my current
Mm-hmm.
coach. When I hired him, I was like, yeah, this is kind of like what I'd like to do. And, he was like, sure, dude, we can do that. And I told him like literally those words. And I told him, so I'm interested in the figure division. And so kind of like we've discussed on previous podcasts, normally with figure, it's like you need some pretty big lats and big quads, honestly. So it's all about balance and symmetry. So from between upper, lower, and left to right. So a very symmetrical look. Um, and so he basically put me on like a figure training split. So that was like, I think that was like summer 2023.
Okay.
So we're
When
coming
would
up
you,
on like 2 years,
crazy
basically.
it's been that long. When
Yeah.
would you say was kind of the turning point where the results really started compounding noticeably, where it was like, wow, I'm seeing a lot of progress here?
I think like honestly right off the rip, because I mean I think there were a couple like critical junctures, we'll call them. But when I started with Dom, I was really like detrained because I was like working through a health phase. So like anything that I did after that was kind of going to be effective probably. Just both in terms of like volume and training intensity, because I was like at 3 days training at like 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 RIR or something like that. So literally anything more than that was going to be like more stimulus, right?
Yeah.
So there was that. So right away I kind of started growing. Um, and to go from like 3 days of training to 5 days of training, I think we're
It's
gonna
a
get
pretty
into
big
that a
jump.
little bit. Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later. So I would say like that was kind of a big one.
Yeah.
And then I would also say I had like another really big push around like September when I got with Nick Gridpath. See previous podcast, everyone, for that episode. But when I started just running into some issues with my shoulder. And it was like if I didn't deal with it, it was gonna really impact like my of course my lat training and like delts. I mean anything upper body related. And so I basically got some things under control and like started moving so much better. And I would say those would be like the biggest things like within that timeline.
Seems pretty accurate for me too.
Oh,
Definitely noticed a big difference like once you started training with Dom. And I think part of that is just the intentionality behind, hey, I'm competing in figure now. These are very important. And similarly with Nick, we just intro that perfectly on the podcast, the previous podcast with him, just talking through how much like improving movement quality can help there. Okay. So let's talk from a training standpoint. What's changed? Got to start with the lats. What would you say are kind of the biggest aha moments you've had over the last few years with your lat training?
um, I think I think a lot of it. I made a little list here, I guess. Um, in terms of like what I think has contributed. To that, I would say like so volume first, which I kind of started to go into like just now, but like going from 3 days of training to 5 days of training was like it's gonna be a big one. Um, and so within that split, I'm like on a lower upper push pull. Did I do that right? Lower upper. What do I do? Quads, pull, push. Push, pull, upper, lower, quads. Whatever order you want to, yeah. It's like a push, pull, legs.
Push,
Like,
pull, upper, lower quads.
yeah, it's like, what do I do? I do upper on, it's like, yeah, it's like lower, upper, quads, pull, push.
Okay, that
So,
makes more sense. Got it.
right. Um, and then prior to that, when I was on like 3 days a week training, prior to that, I was doing 4 days a week. Okay. So, like, for a long time. So, like, upper, lower, upper, lower. So then, I go through this little like kind of detrained period, and then all of a sudden I find myself at like 5 days per week. And so volume has increased like pretty substantially at that point.
Mm,
Um, and also like frequency. So with 5 days, I'm doing upper body 3 times a week. That's like a whole other day. And yeah, one of those days is a dedicated like push day, but like I'm getting upper body volume. Um, So I think that was a really big part of it. And then that initial, like when I initially started with Dom, like I think I have a lot of volume now, I would say, but I had a lot of volume initially, like a lot. And that has kind of since changed a little bit. But I think like frequency is a really big one as well. Um, so I think those were kind of some big, I don't know if those are aha moments, but I would say like big contributors big time. And so within that, like when you have, like just like more frequency, so more like opportunities to train lats, you can put in more variety there. And that's not to say variety is the spice of life here, but I mean like exposure to like different exercises. So like more of an opportunity to get into some of those more nuanced, like a lot of unilateral pulling, a lot.
yeah.
And we've gone over this in previous podcast episodes, in terms of like why that might be beneficial for the lats. And it is because, anatomically, like they wrap around the rib cage, right? So it's like there's like a roundness to them. So when we're training like unilaterally, we're able to like better position our body to get like the best leverage, so that we can exert the most force. Um, and honestly, like I don't have and I mean, you can kind of like throw my shoulder dysfunction on top of that because that's sort of part of the story. But I literally don't have any bilateral pulling in my program. None.
I think those are really good points, though, specifically the frequency.
Yeah.
For lower body, I find it to be less important, but like if we're training upper body twice a week and we're trying to cram all of your upper body work into twice a week, especially like if it's a male client where like, hey, pecs are a priority as well, like your pecs and lats specifically, I think really suffer because just from a time perspective, we don't
Yeah.
have a lot of room to work in like those unilateral movements. Or if we're like trying to cram in like or if we're trying to cram like 12 movements in per training session so it can like I hit this division of the lats and this division of the lats because they with them being kind of fan shaped, we do want to pull up multiple different angles to really bias the lats well. And then we also want to like train our upper back typically. And again, we have our delts, pecs, biceps, triceps. Like that is where I do really like if upper body is a big priority, I do really like having 3 days to work with versus two.
Yeah.
It can be a lot harder to cram in. I don't necessarily think the same for lower body, but I for sure like upper. I think that makes a big difference.
I just think with lower body, there's such a fatigue cost,
Yeah.
and that you kind of like don't have with the lats as much. It's not to
Mhm.
say they don't get tired, but it's not the same. Um, so I think that was huge. And even in my own programming, like I've experimented a lot with clients' programs, like who are on 4 days a week, where like, hey, maybe we'll do like it might be upper lower, but maybe it'll be like push lower, pull upper, and like I've definitely like had clients make progress with that. But I'm kind of now more back around to I really think like frequency is important. You
Totally
know,
agree.
So that's been something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I do think has contributed to like my own personal growth. It's just the frequency with which I hit it.
I can't agree more with all of that. Personal lat training weekly. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I have my program pulled up here because I didn't want to forget. So I have one day that I do upper. So
Mhm.
there will be like push and pull in there. I just
Hmm.
did that session today actually. And it is currently I'm starting with like a chest supported row. And then that is actually a bit of an upper back focus, but we all know
Okay.
that lats are going to be involved there. And then I have the actually, and I lied, that is a bilateral, but I mean it's upper back, so it's I don't know, a little different there. Um, and then I'm doing the prime pull down.
Okay. Nice.
It's a gem like that. So I've got like 3 sets of the chest supported row, 3 sets of the prime pull down. And that's it for my lats specifically today. And then on my pull day, obviously it's going to be, you know, primarily lats. So we've got the prime seated row, which I know you're a fan of. Again, a bit more of an upper back focus for me.
Okay.
Um, and then I've got a single arm pull down, and that's where I'm doing like the Nautilus that I really like. And then I moved to the Nautilus row, the compound row,
Mhm.
unilateral row, um, and then bicep work. So really, that's kind of it. And
That's an
that's
incredible 3 movements in a row, though.
yeah, really, truly, it's my favorite day. And that's changed though, because before I started working with Nick Ridpath, I had like a shit ton more, honestly. I was like pulling every freaking angle, like ever, and then some. And you know what? I feel like I'm screwing up your outline here and I'm like bouncing all over the place.
It's quite all right.
But one of the first things like Nick and I did was we took out a lot of redundancies.
Okay.
So, you know, where it was just like, okay, yeah, maybe there's like a slight angle difference in how you're pulling here, but like when we're starting to talk about things like fatigue cost, like just get it out of there.
Yeah.
Um, and I think this is a really important takeaway too. Like, first and foremost, like, of course, like, I'm a nerd for this stuff and I'm intellectually curious. So, like, I will always, like, ask a coach why, you know, like, again, not from, like, I'm not pushing back, I'm not challenging, I'm just genuinely, like, curious to know your thought process. But at the end of the day, I also just, like, do what I'm told. It's like, this is the goal. I trust you to get me there. I'm just going to do it, you know?
Right.
And so then, you know, when I kind of started looping Nick in on like everything, and again, like troubleshooting shoulder issues and things like that, he's like, get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of this. And I got a lot of time back in my day, which is kind of
Okay.
cool. Like, some of those sessions were like just killer. But I loved it because like I love training. I just like being there. And like, you know,
Yeah.
let's face it, other than work, I don't do anything else. So it wasn't problematic. But this is a good takeaway for the listeners and everyone is that, you know, remember the beginning of the podcast when we were saying like, oh, I think like a really like, you know, aha moment or like when I noticed the most growth was like one of those junctures was, you know, when I started working with Nick. And what changed there, obviously, like you know, attention to detail, we just got me moving a lot better. So execution improved. However, like volume was slashed. Like we literally just removed several movements. And I feel like the growth that I've seen from like September to now has been like the most.
Very relevant to our discussion with him
Yeah.
around how so often less but better ultimately ends up driving so much better of a result. You see that in so many training programs, though, where there's not a lot of thought into, okay, what tissue are we trying to grow here? But it's kind of just like, okay, I'm going to hit you with 5 different squat patterns that are basically doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Or like I've heard the analogy, it's like we're sweeping the same spot on the floor over and over again, right? Where the movement did its job, we trained hard, we executed well. We shouldn't need to like basically do another variation of that exact same pattern.
Right.
So, okay,
And then again, like looking at holistically overall, like what is the fatigue cost of like throwing an extra movement in there? Like, is that,
for
I
sure.
mean, sure, like, you know, when we're talking about the lats, there are like 3 different divisions and like, yeah, sure, we can like get really granular, but like at what cost?
What movements do you feel have made the biggest difference for you, or just your personal favorites? Which I'm pretty sure I know your answers here, but go on.
Actually, I'm going to go in a different direction
Ooh,
just because I don't like for you to be right ever.
okay.
um, so you know, I was gonna say the like the Nautilus pull down and the compound row because those are my favorite. And I will still die on that hill. I love them because they're just like wonderful machines. They've got the swivel handle, so like your ability to just like kind of be neutral at the wrist and like line things up like ergonomically and like whatnot. They're just really well made machines. I like the resistance profile, like all that good stuff. But um, so I would say those. However, um, with some of the stuff that I've been like dealing with my shoulder, I really struggle with like shoulder flexion, especially like overhead, right? So one thing that we've done is like I'm really intentional about like starting my upper body or like my pulling segments or days with like a chest supported row, which yeah, that's like an upper back focus. Obviously, again, there's gonna be a little bit of lat there, but that's been really helpful because that has really just kind of gotten my like scaps doing what they need to be doing to kind of like prime me for like that Nautilus um, unilateral row. Um, so I would say like that's made a really big difference. It's like I'm just kind of like starting with my chest supported row, upper back focus has just like put me in a much better position to do my like overhead pulling work and get more out of that.
So it sounds like you're in a really stable position and you could kind of just focus on getting your scapula moving the way you want. And that carries over really well to everything else.
Yes.
You're right, that was a curveball of an answer I didn't expect, but I love it. So it really seems that movement quality is a huge part of the progress we have made here.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. In this journey, was there a time where it was like, well, shit, to get this right, I have to reduce load, or I have to like kind of feel like I'm taking a step back from what I was doing previously?
Yeah, I mean, I think like when Nick removed a few movements, like I again like I trust the people I hire and I'll always ask questions because again that's who I am. And I want to know and I want to learn. But I wasn't like I wouldn't say I was like worried. Like it's not like Nick is like undercutting me here and like he's trying to sabotage my
He
lats.
actually
Like
wants me to be small and get terrible results.
Jeremiah secretly is paying him to make me smaller. So it wasn't like that or anything, but like, it just it I remember he took away my preacher curls. And I was like, well damn
Mm.
it. Like I actually like training biceps. I had a preacher curl and then just like a lengthened cable curl. And he was like, yeah, like, no, we're not like doing the preacher curls. And I was like, oh, but and we have since added those back in. So like sometimes like movements that I just was like emotionally attached to or I liked, I was just like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. Like that king pull down that I really
Yeah.
like. Remember? Like I haven't been on that in forever. Um so those were like little emotional hits. Um and there have been like I'm still like sometimes taking loads down to like figure things out a little bit. It's kind of like what we've talked about before with movements like an RDL. It's like you'll build, you'll build, and then you kind of hit a plateau or a wall, and you're like, I don't think this is right, and then you kind of have to like dial it back and reassess. I think I know too much to think that those are setbacks. You know what I mean? Because I just
Yeah.
understand they're part of the process and like it's one of those classic like sometimes we need to take a step back to like take two steps forward. I think I understand that process really well, so like I'm pretty good about that. But I'd say dealing with like the niggles and injuries more than anything are like like that feels like a step back. But
Yeah.
then if I kind of zoom out, it really isn't because like me having those shoulder problems like one of the best things that ever happened to me because like now it's like I know so much more and like move so much better and have since seen so much more progress. So,
That is a crazy thing as a coach. I think your own personal struggles and like your biggest frustrations ultimately are the thing that make you the best coach, right? Like we probably wouldn't have gone this deep on movement,
for
on
sure.
shoulder function, on all these things if it wasn't something that you had to work through personally. But now you're brilliant with it because you've kind of been forced to. I can think of so many examples like that in my own career also where it does just make such a ultimately like those things are such a big blessing in disguise.
Yeah. And I think like I've gotten better as I get older and more mature. I can I'm I that thought process gets faster.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I can see that playing out more like in real time faster. I'm like, this is going to be like the best thing that ever happened to me. Like it's annoying as shit right now, but I ultimately know that like this is just going to make everything better. It's going to make me a better coach. It's going to make me a better athlete. I'm going to get better results. My athletes are going to get better results. So,
I can't say I've gotten to that point in maturity yet where I feel like I can process that super quickly, but I do feel so it's understandable when it's frustrating, but it's both the hey, like maybe we're reducing our load a bit so you can actually execute this movement well. But that's not a step back. Again, if we're executing better, we're getting a better stimulus. Ultimately, we're going to build more. But also, like from the working around injuries perspective, like that can just be such a difficult, frustrating thing. But yes, especially if you are a coach, it will just long term, it'll be one of the best things that's happened to you. Okay. When a client wants to grow their lats, what would you say are kind of the weekly boxes that you're looking to tick?
if lats are truly a priority, and like honestly, this is another hill I will die on. I think more people should have lats as a priority.
I agree.
Because I think it does so much for a physique.
Mm-hmm.
Like so many people want that kind of like snatched waist look, and it's like the biggest cheat code there is like just build your lats. You don't have to do anything with your waist. And then also I know we've talked about this from like a functional standpoint, but like so many people get plenty of like pushing in, and like they just don't get a lot of pulling. And then like you look at things like COVID workouts, when people were in lockdown, like, maybe they had some dumbbells and stuff like that. Like it's so much quote easier, like logistically speaking, to like train pushing movements. Like you can just do a push up, or something like that. Or maybe you're a CrossFitter, you could do like handstand push ups, like so yeah, you're overhead pushing, or like maybe you got some dumbbells. But it's just so much harder to get in like a really good like lat stimulus with like a home setup, depending on your setup, of course. But I just for that reason, I think that's really important. Um, from that functional perspective. But again, the difference that it makes on someone's physique, I think, is underrated. So I do try to push people in that direction sometimes. So, like, have you ever thought about getting bigger lats? And I just feel like, especially for women, I feel like that's just so often, like, not often a go-to. Do you find that? Like, does anyone really ever like rock up to elevated coaching systems like, yo, I want some huge lats?
No, I've had a couple of people like send me a picture of you as like their goal so you can like, hey, this is what actually I think I paired them with you. But like, okay, yeah, this girl wants some lats. But no, and normally lats are a huge weakness.
Yeah,
And that's as you said, like it's if you want to snatch your waist, like we all have kind of just like a SpongeBob shaped body if we don't have any lats, right?
yeah.
Um, no, it's very rare. This is like a huge priority for anyone.
So that's number one. Is like sometimes I feel like I like try to push people in that direction. Again, not for selfish reasons, but just because I feel like it will make a pretty significant difference.
Yeah.
Um, but then also it's like I am looking at things like volume and frequency. So a lot of our clients train on like a 4 day upper lower, push pull. Sorry, upper lower split. Um, and so that's where I am probably like on their upper days, like biasing, more pulling to push. And then in a later, mesocycle or training block, perhaps we will like restore balance, at some point there, and pendulum will swing the other way. So that's a big one. And then if lats are truly a priority, I am going to insist on some unilateral movement. Now if time is a consideration, we'll have that conversation, but it's that conversation about like, okay, well, if this is truly a priority, like this is something we like really kind of need to think about. So we might borrow or steal time from something else in order to accommodate that. Um, and then also I do find like training like unilateral upper body is a little bit different than lower. So like a Bulgarian split squat, for example, I mean, I need like like 2 to 3 minutes between sides sometimes, and then I'll take like seven
Yeah.
minutes like
Oh
between
yeah. Looking
sets,
at like 10 minutes per set.
Exactly. But like I don't find the same with like lat training. Like I'm often able to just go right from one side to the other.
Yeah.
And then it's like, you want to think like, okay, if you're gonna take 3 minutes rest between full sets, you can actually make that more like 2.5, right? Because you went from one to the other. Does that make sense? Like,
No, yeah, I
I know you
normally
know what
do
I'm talking
too.
about.
Yeah.
So it's like if you kind of reverse engineer it and think about it that way, like, are you really sinking that much more time to do this in a unilateral way? It's more like the way you're thinking about it. It's more mental, like, oh, it's gonna take so much more time. It's like it actually doesn't.
I agree. Okay. Now, one thing I have seen is most people just don't know how to train their lats. Similar to the like, it's very rare someone says lats are a priority. It's almost like people kind of forget they exist. I think people just kind of think of it as back training.
Mm-hmm.
And I will commonly see like someone's a lot better at getting into their upper back. Very few people naturally know how to like pull. Like it's almost like a bicep
Yes.
pull, you
Yes.
know? So like very common to see like when someone's doing a row or a pull down, basically it looks like we are just like our forearm is getting so close to our bicep at the bottom of the rep. Can you talk through like let's say we're pulling down from overhead and our goal like let's say we're doing a single arm pull down and our goal is to bias the lats. Like what should that look like? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like just general cueing for like kind of setup and what you want to think about a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you want your arm to be tight to the body, right? So we don't want it like flaring out. My favorite general cue is going to be to cue the elbow down, like drive the elbow down. I know a lot of my clients will hear me say like drive the elbow into the hip.
Hmm.
But what I often find with that is, like you said, a lot of people are really pulling with the bicep, right? Like, and the body's smart, right? So if you're not being strategic, like you know that you're trying to like move this thing from point A to point B. So like your body's going to organize itself and figure out like how to do that,
Right.
in the most efficient way that it thinks it knows how. And usually that's what we see is this like kind of like elbow driven like bicep curl. And we see like the shoulder kind of like elevate, right, a lot, and you kind of get that like hunched over like almost shoulder dumping forward a little bit, like, and it's like really tight bicep. So sometimes I like to amend that cue of like, oh, elbow down to the hip, and I'll be like, no, 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 just like drive the elbow down to the ground, like elbow to the floor. And that can like shorten up that range of motion for them a little bit. um and then a lot of times, like, I will kind of address like what's happening at the shoulder, because again, a lot of times they're like initiating with the shoulder. Like
Right.
almost the first thing that happens when someone pulls is like that shoulder elevates.
Yeah.
And like I love, like, our audience cannot see this, but I'm demonstrating right now. But like if you're imagining like your right arm up in the air and you want to pull something down, like the first thing that often happens is like your shoulder like elevates up towards your ear, right? And then you just start like pulling with the bicep. And then the shoulders like still kind of elevated. And
Yeah.
so actually we haven't really done anything with the lat at that point. Like
Shoulder
that's
blade like doesn't move at all in this situation. I see this so
exactly.
often.
Exactly. And like, and what we want, like with any pull or push really, is like we want like the shoulder blade to do what it's meant to do, which is like basically elevate and depress, like around the rib cage. Right. And like, so that's when we kind of like initiate with that shoulder, and the shoulder stays frozen up there and we're pulling with the bicep. The scap's not doing actually like really anything. So we see that a lot.
For
Um,
the listeners as well, if you want the visuals that Natalie and I are doing as we are recording this is also on YouTube if you're not watching on YouTube. So feel free to check that out.
we need a
I think that
Patreon for these top tier visuals.
yeah, they're incredible. But that really is so common, like the just no shoulder blade movement at all. Yeah, as you said, we're almost kind of shrugged up and it's just like immediately like we're back, like forearm comes to the bicep and we just are like then we're just driving the elbow back behind the body, right? Where really what we want is that scapula should be moving down as we're pulling down. Okay, I think that's very well put. Anything else on lat training before we talk about quads?
Again, like we touched on this earlier, but a lot of times, like, why we like these unilateral movements is because we can better organize ourselves to get that arm tight to the torso. So we don't want your elbow like flaring out like we would for like an upper back kind of movement or something like that, or like maybe if we're specifically trying to hit the teres or something like that. But Something like I've kind of had to adjust and think about along the way, like as my lats have grown, I actually have to continually like revisit and change my body orientation. Because like which is actually it's like I know it's like kind of funny, but I think that was like a personal best for me when Nick was like, "Dude, you're just too big now. You need to move over." And it's like, "Oh yeah, that's like this feels different now." Because like again, as the lats have grown, you gotta accommodate them, right? Like so where the again with the visuals that no one can see unless you're on YouTube. But so I've had to kind of like like that with the Nautilus, for example, had to like scoot a little bit further away to like accommodate the arm, or like with the Prime, because the Prime diverges.
Yeah.
So like that I've had to scoot towards it to accommodate that one. Yeah, so that's been interesting. But,
Was
those are adjustments that I would make like with a client based on like what equipment you have available and what equipment you're on. This is why like I will prioritize like a lot of people like don't have access to like this Prime machine or like this Nautilus. But what I use a lot would be like I've been using like a half kneeling pull down a lot lately.
right.
Um, I used to use like a single arm, like a unilateral, like just pull down. But what I find is like I just don't like the way that it looks on most people. Like I don't think people most people do a good job like organizing themselves or like have the degree of kind of like shoulder flexion really needed to like get the most out of that movement. So a lot of times like I'll try to like scoot them back a little bit, or and that's how I started like putting a lot of people in a half kneeling. So like if you'll envision like a lat pull down machine, where your quads are like under the pads, right?
Yeah.
So I'll have them like half kneel like behind that and kind of use that for a pull down as has been one I've used a lot lately. It's pretty easy to get people into like a unilateral row because like most gyms will have like a
Right.
cable rowing station. So that's one that I use a lot too. And I have used like dumbbells, like a lot of home setups, like chest supported rows or like a bench supported like single arm row. It's not my favorite. I don't like the execution that most people are getting on that. So like I really try to prioritize like cable movements or like if you have a good machine.
Okay. Okay. All the I run into that issue a lot with the seated single arm cable pull
Yes.
down as well. The setup is just like, hey, there's nowhere like yes, we need to maintain a little bit more backward lean typically, but then like, well, where do I put my hand? And like, there's a lot more little pieces like that. Like the positioning does get to be quite hard to get down. I'll have to mess with that a little bit more. I'll have to have you send me or try and kind of talk me through how you're setting that up. But for
Yeah,
another time,
I'll go through like another like thing that I commonly see too, because I don't know, I think people might find this helpful, but like so what we're describing here is like if you're on a lat pull down machine and you're just doing like a unilateral pull, a lot of times like because they don't have the room, they end up leaning back, right? And even if they're not like necessarily flared at the rib cage, they're leaning back. And then what we really see is that you're cheating shoulder flexion.
right?
Like now we're almost doing a row and like that's cool too. But that's not like really the intention with that movement. So I think having those tools to be able to like kind of better optimize things for clients has been super helpful.
Love it. Okay, let's talk quads, which I don't think honestly will be as in depth. Um, but what would you say were your biggest aha moments when it comes to quad training?
Um, honestly, I don't struggle with knee flexion, which is a blessing. Like I might struggle with many things, but knee flexion doesn't seem to be one of them. So that's a mark of my character there. So it has really come down mostly, I think, to like just training really, really hard. I wish there was a better answer.
I don't. The thing with quads though, like quads aren't nearly as complicated as the lats, right? Quads, it's typically pretty easy to like. If we can teach someone how to hack squat and leg extension, right? We can teach you how to build your quads, right? If there's a lot less nuance, there's a lot less like. I mean, we're pretty much locked in,
And
but
I will say, like, because I guess we're supposed to kind of be talking nuance a little bit. Like, I think a ton about like my foot pressure, like on things like pendulum, hack, leg press.
Okay.
So, like, what's going on there. And that's really made a difference in terms of like how I can better connect with my quads.
Elaborate on that. What are you
That
thinking about there?
so I think like my clients know that they often hear from me like if they're on a hack squat or a pendulum, or actually, leg press, anything. I'm like heels down. We gotta,
Yes,
but
same.
we need those, yeah, we need those 3 points of contact, right? Like we need like the big toe, little toe, and heel. So we need full foot pressure. And a lot of this is also like from a safety perspective, like with our heels popping up, like if we've got like most of the pressure in like the balls of our feet, that is honestly like where we do tend to see like a little bit more like irritation at the knee. So it's not just because it's like incorrect form, but it's like, yeah, okay, well, like we're mechanically not gonna like do what we need to do there. Um, but I also like I know that personally the way that I walk is I tend to supinate my feet. So I have more pressure on the outsides of my feet. I can like the outsides of my shoes are worn down. Like that's just my gait cycle. Like that's the way that I walk. So I have to be like really intentional about like making sure that there's also foot pressure on like the insides of my foot. And like, I guess, like my hips are like fine in terms of like where they need to be, but it's like kind of making sure that translates down the chain, like from like knee tibia like to like foot pressure has been very helpful for me, and I feel like playing around with that has really impacted like the connection that I have been able to get with my quads. That wouldn't be a starting point for someone that's not where I'm really going to go there. I'll like often ask clients about foot pressure, like, hey, like just out of curiosity. So it might come up if like that presents itself, but for those who are listening who really want to grow their quads, like I wouldn't necessarily say like that's the linchpin or the silver bullet that you're missing. But I thought it was like something interesting to mention. Um,
That is a really good point, though, because for a lot of people, okay, we get you into deep knee flexion, right? We get you like from exercise selection and basically understanding what we need to be doing in the movements. We're there. And then it's like, well, my knees just hurt when I do this. And that is so often because it's like, hey, we are not maintaining heel pressure in the bottom of these movements specifically. And that's a big part of why, again, like, hey, your knee joints ache. And then that can kind of become a limiting factor in itself. I mean, I think it's really just largely understanding as well. Just we need a lot of knee flexion. We want to try to get your hamstrings really close to your calves, basically, get a lot of bend at the knee. Typically, that's going to be a good movement to train our quads. And then, like, our more short position is basically, I guess, basically just leg extensions. Um, Go
I
ahead.
remember, I remember like for a while I was doing a heel elevated Smith machine squat.
Were you doing it though? I remember you subs. I
I
remember you.
was. I did them beautifully, 3 sets every week. But like right next to this like beautiful hack squat, actually, nay, 2 hack squats. I'm like staring at my gym has everything. I'm staring at like 2 hack squats, like the kid in the corner who's been punished, like and relegated to Smith squats. And now like honestly, if you do not have a hack squat at your gym, the heel elevated Smith squat is an excellent option. Like so every client that I have that is doing that, it's because you don't have a hack squat at your gym, okay? But if you have a hack squat, just do the hack squat. And I remember like I'm not one to complain, but like I did kind of like start hinting around with Dom. I was like, yeah, so and finally I remember when he was like, yeah, dude, we can just put that on the hack if you want. I was like, thank you. So I would say that was kind of like a turning point for me because I love to train quads and I really like to work hard and just like really send it, and I love the hack because I can just like slide in and like do my thing and then slide out, and whereas like a Smith squat is just it feels so hard for like all the wrong reasons.
I love it. No, that's. I mean, if we have like a quads are a priority, we have a hack squat, we have a pendulum, leg extensions, a leg press. I like there as well. Not as. I mean, if we have like, I wouldn't choose it over a hack or a pendulum, honestly. But I mean, that's really like pretty solid quad training.
That's literally my quad program.
I
So
was
I
gonna
like,
say same, honestly.
yeah, so like I mean honestly like it's it's I can't you can't argue with it. I warm up with a lying hamstring curl, and that is again like warming up knee flexion, right? And obviously getting some hamstring stimulus as well. And then I do like a top set back off and a drop for pendulum. I love that so much. Like the most punishing
The
way.
drops that you like.
I like the top back off drop. Like it's just such a fun little trifecta there. Um, and then it's like two sets of leg press, three sets of leg extension, and then like two sets of walking lunges.
Oh, and you
Um,
still have that.
well, remember when I had 4 minutes of walking lunges?
Yeah.
I felt like I was doing a CrossFit workout. I was like, this
Yeah.
actually isn't that bad. And then I was like, does Dom think I'm soft? Is that like, does he think this is gonna punish me and like because I'm too soft? But like, this just feels like any other CrossFit workout. It wasn't that bad, honestly.
Right. Okay.
And I talked to Ridpath about it, and he was like, actually, like I like having those in there for you, like just to get you, like moving in a different plane, which is fair. And then I actually don't really have that much single leg work, and I was like, oh yeah, all right, true. So I just have to do like two sets of like 20 or like 10 each side, alternating. Um, Because I was running into this issue with like 4 minutes of walking lunges. Like, other than a gut check every week, it was like, how am I? And I kept coming back to Dom. I was like, how am I progressing this? Because like, I'm a really competitive person, and like I want to know that I'm making progress. So it's like I would literally like count like how many lunges I got in 4 minutes, and I would like push the number. And when I felt like I got to a kind of a ridiculous. I'm like, I can't do like 200 lunges in 4 minutes. So then it's like I would like go up the next set of kettlebells and like make them heavier. And then I was like, actually, this is starting to like blow up my low back a little bit. I don't think this is right. So now that's the evolution of where we are now. Two
Okay.
sets of 10 each side. And it's just
Okay.
like, it feels
That
like this
sounds a
little
lot
like
better.
box that I tick every week where I'm like, yeah, yeah, done. Because like I'm on these like 45 pound, I think the 45 pound kettlebells or
Okay.
something. And I'm like, and it's like I'm also so dead by the time I get there that it's like I can't, like I don't want to use the 50s. Like, and then I train calves.
So it's more so a movement quality thing. It sounds like you're just getting you moving in different planes than anything else.
Exposure. Yeah. Yeah. And that's
Okay.
fair. And so I was like, okay.
Okay. Okay. Anything else on quad training?
I've said this a lot because I think we've talked a lot on this podcast about like lower body training and like how to take it there, and honestly that's like just such a big part of it. And like I try to be really intentional with I mean all of my training, but like lower body training and quads. And a good example I'll give here is like when you're on the leg press. We always talk about controlling the eccentric, but I think the leg press is something I see really often where people just like it's still they're working really hard. You can see it in like the concentric or like the push of the leg press. It's like they're grinding it out, but it's like then every time that sled comes back down, they're just like letting the sled win.
Right.
So it's just like it's almost like a release. So you think about like the push of the sled and it's like, oh, this is like really, really hard. And then you're at the top of the movement where your joints are stacked and locked out. So there's no tension on any muscle, right? And you feel this like momentary relief of tension. And you're like, that feels awesome. And then you just kind of like let the sled go back down. And then you got to generate all this tension again to like get the sled back up to the top. And the thing is like we don't want that tension release.
Right.
Like that is not the point. We want to find the tension in the muscle and keep it there. And I see this like and honestly, I see it on so many other coaches' Instagrams. And like, yeah, I'm like, I don't want to be that person who's like calling people out, but I see it all the time. Like, or a pendulum where someone's just like dropping into the bottom. I wanted to use leg press because I think most people like have access to a leg press. Um, but you know what I mean? It's like they're just like letting that sled kind of like fall, where it's like, no, like you have to be like fighting it and like pushing actively like pushing back against it as it is lowering. This is how we keep the tension in the muscle. So like even think about the bottom of like a hack squat. Maybe more people will understand or resonate with that. But like, gaining momentum into the bottom, it's like you're letting off
Pass it.
tension. And it's
Yeah.
because that's more comfortable. Because the tension is what makes your quads feel like they're going to explode, right? And like that burning sensation where your legs just feel like a balloon that's about to burst. Like you want to find that and keep it and hold it there, even though it's uncomfortable. But it's like everyone's in such a hurry to like offload that tension, and that's just not what we want.
I think with quad training specifically, that is very important to understand because I feel like quad training is a unique kind of pain. Like nothing else, you don't really get it. And like I don't feel the same way with lats by any means, but quads it is like I have to remind myself a lot exactly what you said there, like that tension and that like really shitty feeling in your quads is kind of the goal that we're pursuing.
Yeah, like yeah, like a barbell back squat. Like people like catch that balance at the bottom, and it feels like this momentary release.
Hmm.
Like you don't want that.
Right.
You don't want that. That's why like a lot of the cues that I'll use is like we need to control those transitions better. Like we need to, or I've used the analogy of like it's like a tube of toothpaste, where you're like squeezing out every last drop. Like that's what it needs to feel like, and it feels gross. But the more that you practice it, the more you like train yourself to like chase it because you understand that that's productive.
I love it. I think that's very well put. I need to hop off in a few minutes here. So, any like final thoughts, most important points that you want to touch on before we wrap it up? We've kind of been all over the place with the outline, but I feel like this has turned out better actually than the initial outline. So,
Sorry.
no, this
um
was this is great.
Yeah, like I love doing these episodes because it's really just us nerding out about training. So
Mm,
I'm always down for that kind of chat. This is a theme I think that's come through like that I've tried to put forth on my social media a lot lately. I think that it came through very well with our podcast with Nick Ridpath last week. Movement quality matters. It just matters. Like hire a coach, get your training assessed. Even if you're a coach, get your training assessed. And like I feel like with everything that I've learned, like from Prescript, I mean, and everything that we've done prior to Prescript, of course, like years of experience, but like everything we've learned, like Prescript, like my work with Nick, I honestly just see like shitty movement everywhere now. It's like I look at movement so differently, and like I see it everywhere. Like shoulder problems, and I'm like, oh, and like knowing what I know now, I'm like, dude, I can get you better results. Like I can get you moving better, and I know that that will get you better results. Like I know. So I guess I would end this by by saying like, hey, if you are out there and you are frustrated with your lifting, or you like anything that we've talked about today, you think you're missing anything that we've talked about, or you're curious about it, or you really just like want to get jacked as hell, like please reach out to me because I would love to work with someone like you. I love this stuff. I love talking about this stuff. Um, and I am pretty confident at this point that I can get you more jacked. So I'd love to hear from you.
I love it. No, I think that is, as I've said many times, just such an incredible asset. You're specifically, you are so good, so knowledgeable. Like it's been so super fun learning from you in this regard in the last few months. And again, if we can just get people moving more, basically training more accurately, you can get so much more out of every set. But also, like for you, you've learned so much from Nick, for example. It does take working with a coach who's willing to dig into the nuances, which I know you do, like viewing training, really digging deep into helping people master all these aspects of it. So I couldn't recommend, of course, highly enough either. This is something you want to chat through more, reach out to Natalie, or there's the link to the coaching application in our bio. You can just let me know you want to work with Natalie. I won't hold it against you. That's what we have for y'all for now. As always, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you guys next time.